I begin the video, I just want to take a quick moment to say I've always tried to be incredibly careful when making these videos. These topics can be incredibly difficult to discuss, and it's really easy to upset people without even meaning to do so. I can't tell you how many videos I've put on private or just never published because I questioned some aspect of that video, which is why I've opened this channel to memberships where members would have access to all of those videos along with early access and sneak peeks to my upcoming videos. I might even throw in a members-only live stream from time to time. But if memberships aren't for you and you really want to support this channel, you could always do so by leaving a tip in the tip jar, by clicking on the thanks option, or honestly just hitting the like button because it really does go a long way to help. I appreciate each and every one of you. So with that being said, grab a cup of coffee and let's get into the video, shall we? This video is going to go over like a lead balloon. Usually I script my videos, and this one is incredibly different than that. I have some bullet points and I'm just going to talk. So I guess this is about as close to a public live stream as I feel comfortable doing right now, but I'm just going to go with it. And I think a great place to start with why I'm making this video like this was a comment that was recently left on my most recent community post, where the YouTuber Zero Cool said, "It would be something if you start doing lives. You could take calls from your adoring, unbiased fans. You could even take calls from people who disagree with your unbiased conclusions. Maybe that way we'll get a more direct sense of your bias or lack thereof." Well, Zero Cool, I almost responded to you in the comment section, but I thought that maybe this is a better place to do it. Let's start at the top. Ironically, your comment is a big part of why I'm doing this video like this. This is not scripted, and kind of like me dipping my toe into what it would feel like doing a live on this channel. But let's be honest, man, if I ever did one, you know damn well you and numerous other people would come into my channel and troll the absolute hell out of me because I've committed the crime of challenging the defense team and their numerous court filings that, I mean, honestly, to me and numerous other people have come across as pretty ridiculous. Because I and everybody else here on the internet have been presented with basically the exact same evidence. Don't get me wrong, there are people here online that are suggesting that motorcycle covers were involved or cat hairs, and that's not something that's been put out by the state, so we don't know for a fact if it happened or not. But outside of things like that, we all have been presented the same evidence. So to touch on your comment about suggesting that I'm unbiased or my fans are unbiased or you or anyone else is unbiased is ridiculous. All of us have a bias in this case. We've all been presented with a ton of evidence that, frankly, a lot of it, at least from the defense team, is very subjective in nature. So when you are drawing conclusions based on subjective things, you are creating a bias in your own mind about that. And I'm not saying that my bias is right. I mean, I think it is, but I could be wrong, and I own that. But Zero Cool, to respond to the last part of your comment, if I ever do a live on this channel, I absolutely do not want it to be with someone who agrees with me. My only condition is that whoever I debate on this topic is capable of disagreeing with me without us disrespecting one another. Because yelling and screaming at each other and calling one another names isn't doing anything at all here. It's not making a point, right? It is, however, making us all look like a circus, and I'm so sick of it. I'm so tired of being a part of that part of the community. Because somewhere here along the line, things have gone so off the rails that things like doxing one another's real names and addresses have become kind of par for the course. It's disgusting. I absolutely hate it. If someone disagrees with you, it doesn't give you the right to try to ruin them or hurt their family, period. Someone creating a YouTube video or a podcast or going on someone's live doesn't mean that they're fair game for you to try to ruin their life. But yeah, I don't know if I'll ever do a public live on this channel, but if I do, it's not going to be with someone that helps create an echo chamber with me. So with that being said, let's get into the defense team's recent court filings and the implications that they have for the Delphi case. So I don't plan on reading the entire court filing. That's boring, and I'm not going to put all of you through that. I'm going to touch on key points, and maybe I miss a point that you think is super important, and if I do, go ahead and leave it in the comment section, but I'm going to do my best here to go over at least what my impression of this was. And in short, I felt like the majority of that court filing was subjective and grasping at straws and drawing conclusions and circular logic, and it overshadowed the small portion of that filing that I felt was legitimate and interesting. But the heart of that filing basically suggests that Richard Allen was tortured into going crazy, and thus he confessed to the murders multiple times. And their evidence was all the crazy things Richard Allen did. So he ate poop and flung poop and drank out of the toilet and a bunch of other not normal things. But that's not evidence of Richard Allen being tortured. That's just evidence that he was acting like a psycho. If you're going to say that Richard Allen went crazy because he was tortured, and the evidence that he was tortured is that he went crazy, I mean, that It doesn't get much more circular logic than that. That's like saying that the Bible's real and that the proof that the Bible is real is that the Bible says it's real. There's numerous reasons Richard Allen could have been acting like that outside of him quote-unquote being tortured. I mean, he could have been trying to get off on an insanity plea. He could have been acting that way in an attempt to suggest that he was mentally unfit to stand trial. Suggesting that he was tortured into acting crazy isn't the only possible scenario that could have caused him to behave that way. And don't get me wrong here, there's been numerous studies that have shown that solitary confinement can have a profoundly negative effect on someone's mental health. And if the defense team would have focused on just that, I think that it would have come across a lot more genuine, but that's not what they did in the court filing. Because in that filing, the defense team brought up things like Richard Allen wasn't able to hug his wife long enough, or that he had to sleep near a toilet, or, and I'm not making this up, that Richard Allen's dining accommodations were subpar because he had to eat on the same bed that he slept on. At least to me, it felt like they were one step away from complaining that Richard Allen didn't have a proper duvet for his bed. It came across like they were grasping at straws. It was totally disingenuous, I think not just to me, but numerous other people. And if you're one of the people that truly believes that Richard Allen is innocent, and I respect your belief on that, I'm sure that at least you can sit back and say that not every single thing that the defense put in that filing came across well to the public. So let's talk about some of the things that they put in the filing that actually did seem to have merit. One in specific was that Richard Allen was apparently tased by prison guards. But from my understanding, there's a port where you have to put your arms through when you're being handcuffed before they transport you somewhere, and Richard Allen had his hands in that port and was refusing to remove them from the port, and they tased him as a result. And while I'll agree that I think that's excessive, I don't think they should have done something like that. That's still absolutely not odious, tasering Richard Allen into a confession. That was an inmate not complying and the prison guards using excessive force to make him comply. And before you leave a comment, I told you in the beginning of this video that I have a bias in this case, and I tend to lean towards the prosecution. But that does not mean that I think that Richard Allen is unequivocally guilty, and I'm going to get into that by the end of this video, but before I do, I still have some more criticism of the defense filings. Because if you're going to act like the defense filings were not intended to stir up people's emotions and get the public to go crazy here, explain to me why they referred to Richard Allen's prison cell, and I am not making this up, as a steel and concrete box, aka a cell. I mean, if that's not fucking dramatic, what is? Well, I'm recording this video right now from my wooden cage, aka my office. It's those type of things that are excluding the public from taking the defense filing seriously. It was the Frank's memorandum where they went step by step trying to suggest that one person couldn't dress someone else with dexterity. Like, it was so clearly grasping at straws that I think the majority of people that read that walked away from it thinking it was stupid. And it's terrible that they did that because they do make good points. And they made good points in the Frank's memorandum, and they made good points in this most recent court filing. But it's those type of things that have completely overshadowed the legitimate points they tried to bring up. So what are the legitimate points that they actually did bring up? Let's go over them. Let's start with the Frank's memorandum. To me, the most powerful things they brought up in that memorandum were the witness sighting on the bridge and the vehicle. Because apparently the witness who was responsible for the young guy sketch saw the man on the bridge and she had a really good look at him, and she swore up and down this was a man in his 20s with curly hair. And yeah, that's insane, and I have zero explanation for it whatsoever. But the defense team was so focused on a third-party guilt strategy that they completely glossed over the one thing that I think people in the public would have actually responded to. Then there is the vehicle. Someone referred to it as a PT Cruiser, and another person referred to it as like an older model, boxy-style car, and that is absolutely, at least to me, not something that someone could confuse with a modern Ford Focus. The car was less compelling to me than the witness. The witness was very compelling. That was a very interesting thing, and I think that maybe that's a big part of why Nick McClelland believes that more than one person might have been involved. Moving on to the more recent filings, the defense is trying to suppress Richard Allen's confessions while simultaneously saying that Richard Allen's actual confessions don't match the known details of the crime. In specific, the defense says that at one point Richard Allen actually claimed that he shot the girls, and we all know that didn't happen. The only problem with that confession in specific is that it apparently came from an inmate that was guarding Richard Allen's prison cell. Why inmates are guarding Richard Allen's prison cell is kind of beyond me. I think we can all agree that that's a really weird thing for them to do, but I mean, I guess it's what they did. But any confession given to an inmate, at least to me, immediately loses a lot of its legitimacy because there's a whole lot of reasons for an inmate to testify against someone else that's in prison with them. Mostly because more often than not, inmates that testify against other inmates can often get reduced sentences. So the legitimacy of this supposed confession to an inmate is immediately questioned by the fact that it happened to another inmate, if it happened at all. So even if that inmate had come forward with details that were actually consistent with the crime, I wouldn't have really considered that a legitimate confession. But that works both ways. If an inmate has every reason in the world to lie and come forward with a supposed confession from Richard Allen, then how can we take anything that inmate said, whether it was good or whether it was bad, seriously? What matters much more to me is Richard Allen's confessions on a recorded line, supposedly with his mother and his wife. I think it's super important for everyone in the public to hear those confessions. We need to know if there were details in those confessions that only the killer could have known. Because if there aren't, and the only details that supposedly have come out aren't consistent with the crime, then why the hell is the defense team trying to suppress the confessions in the first place? The one thing I hear almost all the time from people who are super pro-defense is that they want transparency in the case. They want cameras in the courtroom. They want everyone in the public to know what's really going on here. But if you really believe that, you're an absolute hypocrite if you're in favor of suppressing the details of Richard Allen's confessions. All of the evidence should be laid on the table. There should be cameras in the courtroom, and there should be complete transparency. And I think it was a huge mistake on the part of the judge to not allow cameras in the courtroom, but in the end, that's what she did. Apparently, Richard Allen went on to confess that he molested the girls, and a lot of people here online have suggested that since the girls were not sexually assaulted, then that's another thing that would show that Richard Allen's confessions aren't consistent with the details of the crime. But if we're being honest, I think we all are very aware that sexual assault that is capable of being seen in an autopsy is very different than someone being molested. There's evidence that's left behind when someone's raped, but I would challenge you to explain to me what kind of evidence could be left behind by someone touching or molesting a girl that's capable of being seen in an autopsy. In the end, the strongest parts of the defense team's most recent court filings were that Richard Allen has been held in solitary confinement. And there is a ton of evidence to back up that solitary confinement can make people go crazy. And in the end, I think there's at least a plausible argument that prolonged exposure to solitary confinement could absolutely lead to a false confession, which is why the details of Richard Allen's confessions need to be made public. We all need to see them. The whole situation is not black and white. You can't, on one hand, make an argument that Richard Allen shouldn't be held in solitary confinement while you're simultaneously making an argument that other inmates are screaming at him that he's a baby killer. Just like you can't make the argument that Richard Allen shouldn't be held in shackles while you're at the same time saying that he's eating poo and drinking out of the toilet and acting like a total psycho. But while I tend to think that the known evidence suggests that Richard Allen most likely is the guy on the bridge, there's lots of points brought up by the defense team and even people here online that are super pro-defense that I agree with, completely agree with. Richard Allen absolutely deserves a fair trial. If Richard Allen is actually innocent, there's not a single part of me that wants to see him convicted. I don't want there to be any doubt in anyone's mind whatsoever when this trial is over, whether he's acquitted or whether he's convicted. And as much as I and so many other people here online want that, I just don't know if that's going to happen. I cannot stress in strong enough words how much of a mistake I think it was for them to have not allowed cameras in the courtroom. Even if they had, I still think there would have been questions surrounding the case, but I think there would have been a lot less of them. But like it or not, this is where we're at, and I hope that the judge reconsiders her decision about cameras in the courtroom, but I just don't think that's going to happen. Either way, thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. I know it is completely different than my normal type of video. This was more of like a podcast-y type format. I don't know how well it's going to be received. I would really like to know your thoughts on this style of format or me even doing live streams. I'm very curious to know what you think. So long as you're not hurling insults or being crazy, I will not delete your comment in my comment section or block you, especially if you don't agree with me. Because there's lots of people out there who've been critical of the prosecution that I think are intelligent, good people. Just because someone doesn't agree with you on this case does not inherently make that person a bad or evil person. Their actions define that, not their opinion. And as always, thank you so much for watching.